When they first are told that they qualify for hospice, and that means we expect you to die within 6 months, that's hard to swallow, and that does create fear. My former mother-in-law had died on hospice, and the nurses were amazing, and I felt like that work was sacred. The family really has, I think, more fear around it. They're afraid of, losing the person who they love. You're grieving that person dying. That person who's dying is also grieving. They're grieving the end of their life too. It's more important to let the person who's dying know what they meant to you, that their
Hmm.
life had meaning and purpose.
All right, welcome back. We have a great episode planned for you today. I have with me my dear friend Nurse Penny. Nurse Penny is a board certified hospice nurse, author, and social media content creator who has become a compassionate voice for end of life care. With years of experience guiding patients and families through their final chapters, Penny shares honest, deeply human stories about death, dignity, and what truly matters. Many of you know her from her viral videos that have touched millions, bringing awareness to hospice work and breaking taboos around dying. Today, Nurse Penny opens up about the emotional realities of her work, the wisdom she's learned from the dying process, and how facing death can help us live more fully. Penny, welcome to the show. Thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about this conversation. I was very touched from our conversations prior to this in preparation for the episode. Salute you for being so forthcoming and honest about your own personal journey. And I think it takes a lot of humility to be able to work in hospice and with patients and families going through the death and dying process. So being authentic is really, really important. And that's something that was so obvious when we first connected, that you're able to bring your whole self when you're talking to someone. And patients and families that are so vulnerable during this time, I'm certain are really grateful. What I thought was interesting is you became a nurse at age 40, dealing with your own obstacles with substance use and addiction and jail time. And I'm really curious, how did you transition from really being tested to turning things around for yourself?
Well, I had already been, since I was 27, had gone through treatment and had already been kind of trying to clean my life up. I was sober for 8 years, off drugs for 8 years, and remarried, had some kids, became like the stay-at-home mom, and really felt like my life was on track again. Did start drinking after 8 years because my second husband was a normie, as we call him in the addiction biz, or recovery biz. And he couldn't understand how I called myself an alcoholic when I didn't drink alcohol anymore. And I also started to question that. So I kind of started drinking again, but I was still able to maintain like this pretty normal life of being a stay-at-home mom. 10 years into our marriage, I we decided together that we were going to get divorced. And because I had been a stay-at-home mom and my only career prior to getting married was bartending, I knew that I needed to do something for a living. Even though I had really, really redeemed myself a lot in my own eyes through, changing my life, I still had this nagging feeling of needing more redemption. Like I really wanted to do something that was going to contribute to society because I had been such a taker from it for so long. And so I felt like I needed to do service work. Now, all nursing is service work, so don't get me wrong, but hospice was something that really resonated with me more. My former mother-in-law had died on hospice, and the nurses were amazing, and I felt like that work was sacred and just something that I thought, I can probably do this And this would be a way for me to kind of redeem myself, just kind of be a better person
Do you
at
feel it?
that.
Was it as satisfying going through it as you had hoped it would be?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And for a number of reasons. For one, because of my past and dealing with the things that I dealt with earlier in life, I felt like I had like the wherewithal to do that kind of work, to be with dying people. So it was very rewarding in that sense, but definitely made me feel like I could forgive myself for the things that I had done and forgive those who had hurt me along the way as well.
So there was like a level of closure that you were able to get with every day you were giving back, which is incredible, right? It's satisfying in two ways: one from the giving, and one from your own personal work that you're doing every day.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I for sure both. I felt like it was a gift to me. Some people say, it's a gift. I'm gifted, and so I can do this work. And for me, it was like a gift that was given to me to be able to do this work, to be with people through this journey that's just, incredibly meaningful and important that
Yeah,
we're all going to go through,
it's interesting. Most people don't know this, but I had a very rough middle school experience with like a lot of trauma. It haunted me for many, many years. And in between medical school and residency, I was a middle school teacher for 2 years. And a lot of people ask why I did it, and the generic answer was always, "Oh, I wanted to give back, and I wanted to work with young adults, and I enjoy teaching." Um, but the truth is, a portion of it was to rewrite history, and
Yes.
and I went there and rewrote history, and almost relived middle school, even though I was an adult. Um, I had to go back and see it for myself and see if I appreciate the dynamics differently, if I had like my own work to do there. I was no one knew this, but there was like some personal mission that I was on, and it was very rewarding.
That's exactly how I feel. It's been a personal mission for me to do this work and to really be able to say, wow, look what I did. I went from this, and boy, I didn't go to middle school. We didn't have middle school in my day. We had elementary, junior high, and then high
Yes,
school.
junior high, right?
Yeah, and same thing. I'm bullied, and it was horrible. And but just to be able to go, look how far I've come.
Yeah,
Like I went through all of this, and now look who I am. And it's funny because people will say, hospice nurses are angels. And you would think that that would make me feel like really good, right? Like, oh, yeah, I'm so amazing now. I'm an angel. But it's funny that that does not sit well with me when people say that because I feel like I'm not an angel. I've been through, all this crap in the past and did all this really bad stuff. I'm not an angel, but I do feel like I'm not a bad person. I do good things now. And so even though I did bad things before, I'm not a bad person. I do good things. So maybe
yeah.
that makes me
It
a
was
good
like a level
person.
like that's like the redemption, right?
Yeah.
Of giving back in that sense. So you really ran towards death. A lot of people run away from death. And you once said that death isn't scary. It's really the suffering that's scary. So I'm curious. A lot of our listeners are connected to the mental health space in one way or another, directly or indirectly. There's a lot of components to death and dying, but if you had to pick, what's the most misunderstood part about dying that you think the public usually gets wrong?
That's not going to happen. No, that we shouldn't talk about it. Like I think the most misunderstood thing is that we shouldn't talk about death. Like that talking about it is going to um I don't know, make it happen faster or create sadness or more fear or more anxiety. And really, it's actually the opposite of that. The more we talk about it, the less fear and anxiety we'll have around it. We'll always have sadness when someone's dying. We're always going to be sad, but that experience does not have to be scary. And the more we talk about it, the less scary it's going to be because, we're always going to fear the unknown. But once you start to have a conversation and really understand, like, what's this dying thing really about, it just becomes more of a like normal part of life, which it is, and less something that we should be afraid of.
Yeah, actually, and if you look at your videos and your content and how they go viral, it goes to show how much curiosity is out there. That even if people aren't talking about it, they are incredibly curious, and want to understand and want to know, and maybe don't feel like it's within reach. And one of the greatest things you do is make it accessible to them, which normalizes it. And then I think that's the first step, is to make it acceptable, normalizing it, making it something comfortable to talk about. Even in mental health, we have the same thing. It's only recently are you seeing people talk about mental illness comfortably. It used to be very taboo. It was dismissed, and people weren't allowed to acknowledge mental health issues until it was too late. So, we are seeing a transition in that direction. I certainly think there's a long way to go, but you're at the forefront of changing that, which I think is really cool. I'm curious. You mentioned last time we spoke that you've experienced mental health in your circle of friends and family, and people you care about have been impacted by mental health issues. Do you feel that that's changed your ability to empathize with patients and connecting with those that are dying?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That, and also, having myself had my addiction issues, and you know living the life that I lived, all of that has contributed to my ability to be very empathetic. The AA saying, there but for the grace of God go I. So caring for people who are dying from alcoholism or drug addiction, or are homeless. I never feel judgmental. I never feel like they're less than because of those things, because that was me, or could have been me had I continued on the path that I was on. So yeah, definitely, that has all helped me to feel, um, to recognize the humanity in people, and to not view them harshly.
Yeah. Who do you think's more scared in hospice, the family or the patient?
I think it's usually the family, because the patient, when they first are told that they qualify for hospice, and that means we expect you to die within 6 months, that's hard to swallow, and that does create fear for the person who's dying. But they usually kind of get over that pretty quickly, and focus more on what can they do with that time that they have left. They still are going to be afraid of what's going to happen to their family, and they are often afraid of what does dying look like, but they're not really afraid of the whole death part anymore. The family really has, I think, more fear around it. They're afraid of, losing the person who they love. And that's a very, very strong and valid fear to have.
Sure. I mean, first part of grieving, right? They have that denial, and it takes a long time for them to come to terms with it. And I sometimes wonder if that's doing more harm than good for the patient, right? That you're now I've seen situations where the patient is comforting the family,
Yeah.
that you got
Well,
you guys are going to be okay and you'll be fine, and I've organized everything and I've written everything down, and it's like it's so backwards sometimes.
Well, also because people who are dying often want to talk about it. They want to process it, but they don't want to talk about it with their family because they're afraid that their family is going to be bummed out, but surprised they're going to be anyway. And then the family doesn't want to bring up to the person because they think they're going to cause them to lose hope and they'll die faster. So there's this wall in between them, and it really prohibits any kind of very meaningful end of life conversations and closure and goodbyes. It's unfortunate that it's like that. And there's a lot of, talking about the family and how the family perceives everything. Not only do they have this fear and this sadness, this grief over losing their person who they love, they also have a lot of guilt around it
Mm,
as
that's
well,
true.
especially if the person who's dying is kind of lingering. And sometimes people, when they're going through a natural dying process, they'll be in this like holding pattern where they're just kind of lingering and lingering, and the family starts to feel really stressed out, like, ooh, like, why, what's happening, what's wrong, why are they, like, this is just I just need this to be over. They get to this, I just need this to be over. The waiting is the hardest part. And then they realize that by wishing it was over, they are hoping that their person will die faster, and that creates a lot of guilt. They say anticipatory grief is like being forced to watch a whole movie when you know the ending is bad. And when someone is dying, the movie is them dying and the ending is their death. So you're the
Right.
family that's having to be forced to watch this, and it's really hard because it creates so much guilt. I've just seen that so many times where they just feel guilty.
It's very agonizing for them to navigate that. So, I mean, they need to do their own processing. The patient has to do their own processing. But what's interesting is that you see people kind of in their truest form of themselves towards the end. Um, have you witnessed something that you felt is unique to the hospice patient population that even maybe their families don't know or can't appreciate that you saw it towards the end about people?
Well, no, not really. It's funny because people will often ask me, does somebody who's like maybe a narcissist or just not a
Yeah.
nice person, do they change on their deathbed? Like, do they have an epiphany? Are they all of a sudden realizing that
Hmm.
they did these things and they wish that they, were different and they're sorry for what they did?
Like
And really,
remorseful.
no. Yeah, remorseful, but yeah, no, they're not, because people die how they live. So if you're a jerk while you're living, you're going to be a jerk while you're dying too.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
that's something that is,
Yeah, that is
families
interesting.
families really expect somebody who treated them badly to all of a sudden be like, gosh, I'm sorry that I
And make
was like
make
that to
amends at the
you.
end, right?
Exactly. And they don't rarely. I don't know that I've ever seen that happen.
That's kind of disappointing.
It is.
Especially if if you've had like if you've experienced trauma growing up and you're hoping that there'll be a happy ending, and there just isn't one till the very end.
Mm-hmm.
If you were in a toxic relationship with a parent or a spouse, and if it's going to be toxic till the very last day, that's exhausting.
Well, think about it. It would probably take years of therapy for that person who's maybe the narcissist to stop being that way or to recognize
Yeah.
that they were that way, right? They don't instantly get that knowledge just because they're dying. So that's why, when somebody says, I do not want to see whoever, my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother, when they're dying, I don't want to see them. We never guilt them. We never say, well, they're dying, you really should go see them and say goodbye. It's like, if you didn't have a good relationship with that person, then you don't owe them anything. People don't get to be forgiven just by virtue of the fact that they're dying. Like that doesn't just automatically award you forgiveness from the people that you've hurt.
Yeah. If anything, I would think from a mental health perspective, the opposite is more therapeutic. If the dying person forgives you, you're the one that's going to continue living. That seems valuable. You forgiving the dying person, I mean, less, you know what I'm saying?
And yeah, and you can forgive somebody without going and seeing them in
Yeah,
person. You don't you can forgive someone without going there and because you never know what you're
subjecting yourself
subjecting
to that.
yourself to. Yeah.
No, that's true. So, you retired a few weeks ago.
Hmm.
So that's super exciting. Congratulations.
Thank
Really,
you.
really happy for you after giving a lot of yourself and working very hard as a hospice nurse. Looking back though, is there anything you would do differently?
I think I probably would have taken more notes. I would have taken notes, I think, because I did write stories along the way about some of my patients, but there are things that I experienced that are ingrained into me now that it's just because I was exposed to so many different situations that were life lessons that are just part of who I am now, but I can't share that information, anecdotally because I don't exactly remember the situations.
Hmm.
If that makes sense, I just wish I would have, you know, written more stuff down along the way.
Right.
It's funny because I've cared for thousands of dying people and their families, and every now and then one will pop into my mind, and I'll think, oh, that's right, I remember that, and it's become part of who I am, but I can't always share it out as much as I want to because I don't remember exactly the situation or the circumstances. Like when people say, what is the most regrets that people have when they're dying? I never wrote anything down that someone said to me. I can tell you generally, I wish I wouldn't have worked as much. I wish I would have spent more time with my family, but I don't remember specific situations that
Hmm.
people shared with me.
Interesting that you mentioned writing things down, though, that you wish you did more of that because we talk a lot about journaling being therapeutic. As a psychiatrist, and I know the therapist I work with, you carry a lot in mental health, hearing, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, hearing what people are going through and helping them navigate it. It takes a toll on you. If you're actively listening for all that time, how did you deal with your own self care, hearing all the grief and seeing what families are going through and being in that environment? If you weren't writing things down, what were you doing to decompress to make sure you come in fresh the next morning and could be present for your patients?
I was really good at emotional boundaries. So understanding that this is my job and this is not my person that's dying. It's not my family. I am there to help them. And, if I have made the person comfortable at till the end of their life and their family knew what to expect and they weren't afraid that when they died, it was a job well done. I did not go to funerals because I would end up spending all of my free time going to funerals. Again, not my family. I just was really good at separating myself. That's not to say that I wasn't compassionate. I was very compassionate and caring towards my patients, but I was able to turn it off when I went home. And also, I'm a big time gardener. So I get a lot of my self care through gardening. Absolutely love like creating life in the dirt. That's something that's really important to me. And that was what I did to care for myself. And just really, spending time with my family, turning my phone off at the end of the day and being present with my family. That was, important to me to be able to do it.
Oh, and those are certainly healthy coping skills, good boundary setting. Really, you protected your mental health, you insulated it. very well, and I'm sure you were able to appreciate your vulnerability, having been through a lot in the past. Uh, Probably guarded your mental health
Oh,
very
definitely.
closely. Nobody was going to penetrate that, so you don't fall back to where you were, because you basically climbed the mountain all over again, got to the top. You weren't letting anyone knock you down.
Well, and truthfully, I did go back to drinking again. Now I'm, almost 5 years sober now, but I did go
Congratulations.
back to drinking on the weekend. And so, if I'm honest, I have to say alcohol probably helped with the coping too, not in a good way.
Right.
But it's the truth. Yeah, I only usually drank on weekends. I was a functional alcoholic, but that was part of the unhealthy part of my coping. And I wasn't perfect at, you know, completely separating myself too. There were situations with patients that really weighed heavy on my heart that I did take home and feel like, ugh, not a lot. There's just a couple. I wrote about them in my book actually because they were significant enough to where I remembered all the details of those stories. And just one patient that I had who was a narcissist, and I worked so hard for him to make sure that he had a good death and went on vacation. And I was checking, I knew he was dying. I got him into a hospice care center. He had lived alone, got him into a hospice care center, and basically said goodbye to him. It was the weekend, and I knew he was dying. I knew I wasn't going to see him again. So we said goodbye to each other. And it's funny, I want to tell you something. These patients that have no friends or family because their personality is so awful are the ones that hospice nurses find really more endearing. And it's odd,
Wow.
but like it's weird because like we're only there for a small part of their life. We don't see all the stuff that they've done. We just see somebody who's dying and vulnerable, and we want to be able to help them, and nobody else is doing it. Um, and so this was one of those types of situations. And I went to the cabin with my husband, and this is where the boundaries are bad. I was checking my email, my work email, to look at the death list to see if he had died yet. He hadn't. And I said to my husband, I cannot go back to work tomorrow. I can't go see him again. I said goodbye to him already. I just can't do it. And so I called in sick, took another day, and then he did die. And that's how I had to deal with that particular
Wow. Really,
situation.
really, really protected yourself. You think people know when it's about to happen?
Oh yeah, yeah, people know. Barbara Carnes is a hospice RN from like the 70s. She is the OG hospice nurse, and she has written a ton of literature on the dying process. And she says, we live in our bodies, we know when we're dying. And if you think about it, anytime you've ever been sick, you know you're sick. It's the same. People know when they're dying. Not only do they know, but some people actually seem to have control over when that will happen. And they wait for people to arrive, or more commonly, they wait for people to leave. So you'll have a whole family that's holding vigil at a dying person's bedside, and they're just here, like waiting, waiting, waiting. That person is just, you thinking they're going to die any minute, but they're just hanging in there, hanging in there. And then the family steps out to go get a bite to eat, and they die the moment they walk out of the room. And I've
Yeah.
just seen it so many
We've had
times.
uh we've had both in my family. My uncle was at my grandma and he was there for hours. The second he left, she died. And then my other grandma, my dad was with her for a couple of days in Los Angeles. He flew back to New York. He landed. His sisters called him and said, the doctors are saying it's going to happen soon. Come back. And he literally had just flown here. Went back to the airport, flew back, saw his mom. She held his hand and closed her eyes.
Mm,
And it's weird. Like, how did it happen?
yeah.
How did it happen on cue like that?
That doesn't happen very often on cue. Like, let me tell you, like when people say they had their last words and then they closed their eyes and died, that does not happen very often. It happened with my dad. My dad did that. He told the nurse, I'm about ready to hang it up, and then he died. And in fact, my patient that I just told you about, the one that I didn't want to go back and see, he was holding out for his estranged son to visit. And the story I heard from my social worker was when the son showed up and said, I forgive you, Dad. My patient said, uh, I can go now, and died. So
Wow.
very
I
rarely,
just got the chills. Wow.
yeah, very rarely that happens that way. It does sometimes, but usually you don't know what a person's last words were unless you are writing down everything they said, because at some point they stop talking and then they slip into unresponsiveness and then they eventually die. So they don't
Right.
usually, you know, say those magical words like what is it, Steve Jobs, who said like, oh wow, or something, and then he died.
Hmm.
That type of thing just doesn't happen very often.
Interesting. Do you have any advice for families that are navigating this process right now that are very scared? What would you tell them?
Oh, I would say, don't be afraid to learn as much as you can about the dying process. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to approach the subject with the person who's dying. You can always give them the out of, if you're not ready to talk about this right now, we won't, but allow them the opportunity to share how they feel about their life coming to an end. Because, you're grieving that person dying. That person who's dying is also grieving. They're grieving the end of their life too. So, I think it's just really important for people to have a conversation. It's hard. It's a hard conversation, but it will be the most meaningful conversation you will ever have in your life. And you will never regret it. You will never regret
Yeah.
talking to that person at the end of their life and letting them know everything that they meant to you. And that's the other thing too. We used to say, "Oh, you should always tell someone it's okay," or that you'll be okay. And that's not always true. You don't always feel that way when someone's dying. It's hard to say, I told them, that I'll be okay, but I really wasn't okay. And the person who's dying can feel that. They know that, if you're lying about it. It's more important to let the person who's dying know what they meant to you, that their
Hmm.
life had meaning and purpose. That's what people want to know when they're dying. It's that their life had meaning and purpose.
And that's profound. Do you think there's a difference between at-home hospice versus going to a facility?
Yes. So most hospice does take place in people's home. Uh, it's still a home. If it's a nursing home, that's a home. If it's an adult family home, that's a home. If it's an assisted living, that's a home. But as far as like a hospice care center, usually
Right.
people who go to a hospice care center are acutely in need of symptom management. And it's a short-term stay. They're not usually there for a long time. Most hospice takes place in the home. And the difference is that when they're at home, the family is the caregiver. And that's really hard. That's very hard. We unfortunately do not have in our current healthcare system um, the the means to support a family in caregiving beyond hospice educating them about what they need to do and having a bath aide come every couple days or whatever. We just don't have that in our healthcare system. So it's really hard for families to be those caregivers and do that actual hands-on work. It's emotionally draining, it's physically
Sure.
draining. Yeah, it's unfortunate. We just don't have it. And it's hard even if they're in a nursing home and they're being cared for by nursing staff, because nursing homes are really taxed right now too and
Yeah.
understaffed. And then you worry that your person's not getting the care that they deserve, to have at the end of life, because, they just don't have the staff to be able to be there.
Absolutely. So now that you're retired and you've been doing all this great work, what's next for you? What could we expect?
Well, I'm actually working on a second book with my partner who is a hospice social worker. We have a podcast together
Nice.
called Death Happens, an Insider's Guide to Dying. And we've put our podcast on pause so that we can write this book together. Um, just doing keynote speeches, continuing to educate on social media. That's really my jam. I absolutely love that. I really get a lot of satisfaction out of just teaching about end of life and normalizing the dying process. That's really important to me. I think I probably will end up going back to doing patient care, maybe per diem.
Hmm.
Uh, like need to maintain my nursing license. I'm not ready to give that up yet. I worked way too hard for it to just let
Sure.
it go.
And keep your
So
skills sharp.
yeah, just keep my skills sharp and do the required hours. So probably next year, going to look into picking up some shifts doing patient care again in hospice, or maybe doing some per diem work in long-term care. That's another thing that was a passion of mine when I became a nurse. It was either going to be hospice nursing or long-term care because at that time there was a lot of abuse happening in long-term
Sure.
care
Sure.
facilities, and I just wanted to make a difference in that arena as well. I also am really passionate about addiction
Hmm. Yeah,
recovery.
there really is a need. There's so much more awareness now when it comes to substance use disorder that people are coming forward, people are more comfortable discussing it, people are more open and willing to start treatment. We have more options than ever. So it is it's really opportune time to support the specialty and help people. So we would certainly welcome you in addiction psychiatry, of course. Nurse Penny, you are a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you very, very much for being here today. As always, I enjoy our conversations. I salute you for all the work you're doing. I look forward to reading the second book. That's really exciting, and wish you the best of luck. And hope to have you on the show again soon.
Thank you.